Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The mayor of Ottawa has declared a state of emergency as the Freedom Convoy rally continues in our nation's capital. We chat with the mayor of Coutts, Alberta, to get the latest on the mandate protests taking place at his border village. And tensions between Russia and Ukraine continue to escalate. We hear from our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, who has the latest.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The mayor of Ottawa, Jim Watson, has declared a state of emergency in his city. The Freedom Convoy protest continues unabated as thousands of supporters have camped in downtown Ottawa demanding that all COVID-19 mandates be scrapped. An Ottawa judge granted an interim injunction for 10 days seeking to silence the honking horns that has plagued the downtown core for the past 11 days. There are also reports that police have been instructed to seize jerry cans full of fuel that were meant for the truckers. BCN video journalist Naveen Day is covering the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa. Nav, what does the state of emergency mean for the protesters and for the residents in our nation's capital?
Well, Hal, that is a tricky question to answer. You see, a public state of emergency can only be declared when there is an imminent threat to person, property, or state. That is according to David Leese from the Frontier Centre for Public Policy. And from walking the streets of Ottawa and seeing what we're seeing here, we really don't know how the police would proceed with that. But to answer your question on what it could mean for Ottawa citizens and truckers, we could see further enforcement on existing bylaws, such as noise or public disturbance. One example is that Ottawa bylaw officers handed out close to 800 parking tickets over the weekend. And further to that, the Ottawa police chief is requesting that 1,800 additional officers be added to their existing force of 2,100. And from what we see on the ground, the officers on duty appear to be burning out. And we have also heard that Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson is calling on the Trudeau government to appoint a mediator to work out a deal with the Freedom Convoy.
Thanks so much, Nav. That was video journalist Naveen Day joining us from Ottawa. A 21-year-old Ottawa government worker has launched a $10 million lawsuit against the organizers of the Freedom Convoy for damages allegedly caused by honking of horns during the rally. Zexi Lee says she was unable to enjoy relative quiet and the horns caused her unbearable stress. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms was in court today fighting the case on behalf of the Freedom Convoy organizers. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is calling on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to address the Freedom Convoy as the rally continues in Ottawa. The NDP is seeking an emergency debate in the House of Commons.
We need to see some leadership, and there hasn't been that leadership at the federal level, and so we're calling for that. We have a crisis on our hands, and we need to immediately have the Prime Minister, representing the federal level, the federal government, meet with the affected municipalities to offer any help that we can to solve this problem. And there's serious concerns going on. Obviously, in Ottawa, people are going through a really horrible situation where it's clear that the stated intent of this convoy is to overthrow the government. It's in their memorandum of understanding. It's clear they're not hiding away from it. And they are harassing citizens. They are threatening people, assaulting people. And recent examples of setting fire to a building because they're fed up with the noise is clear. This is a violent and dangerous action that is causing really severe consequences to people.
Protesters opposed to vaccine mandates and other COVID-19 restrictions continue to hold rallies all across the country. Many demonstrators gathered in cities like Toronto and Fredericton to offer their support.
Hoping that the people will wake up. Will wake up that everything that we're being restricted, everything that is going on with the COVID, like we should be pro-choice. We should be allowed to choose. We should be allowed to go for a walk without having permission. We should be allowed to go anywhere without having a curfew. Like, this is Canada. This is what we represent. This is what we're loved for. This is why every other country just loves Canada, because we're peaceful people. So why do this to our people? Why do this to the people that are here for Canada?
You know, it's crazy what this government is doing to its own people. We've been sold out, as my sign says, to the globalists.
Everyone seems complicit to one narrow narrative, and that really bothers me. Where are the media reporters asking contrary questions like, oh, well, what about this? What are the costs of lockdowns? In order to declare emergency, you need to demonstrate that this will be better than the alternative.
Meanwhile, protesters at the Coots border crossing have continued to stand firm with their protesting of the government COVID-19 mandates. A second blockade between Milk River and the Coots border has allowed for one lane of the highway to open, letting traffic in and out. Coots Mayor Jim Willett says he went down to the blockade this past weekend and talked to organizers. He said he supports peaceful protests, but not when they turn illegal.
The problem is they're still parked on the highway, so they're in contravention of the law. So sooner or later, you're going to find problems with licensing and insurance and all that. I'm not an owner operator, so I don't know exactly how it will impact, but I know there's going to be problems there. So you should really be considering your livelihood and how this is going to impact on that in the long run.
Well, it says around half of Coots, close to 250 residents, are in favor of the truckers' protest. Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley blasted the Kenney government over the Coots blockade, saying the UCP has tossed out their values for votes.
UCP MLAs have participated in this illegal blockade and they have cheered them on from a distance, and they remain in the government caucus. The UCP cabinet, meanwhile, is surrendering in slow motion to those who are illegally blockading the highway at Coots. The sight of an elected government being bent to the will of criminals should be of grave concern to everyone, regardless of their political beliefs. So I'm calling on this UCP government, before they announce any changes to public health policy, to begin by upholding the rule of law.
Well, the warm weather has arrived here in southwestern Alberta thanks to those very strong Chinook winds. Jeanette Rocher is here now with an early peek of the weather forecast. Jeanette, we even had another wind warning issued today thanks to those Chinook winds.
Yes, Hal, we did. Parts of southern Alberta saw wind gusts up to 110 kilometers per hour. And like you said, it is bringing in those warmer temperatures. In fact, Grassy Lake, Alberta, which is just to the east of us on Highway 3, was the warm spot, not just in Alberta, but in all of Canada today with a high of 15 degrees. And Lethbridge also saw teen temperatures. Our high was 11, but we exceeded that, got up to 13 degrees. I say not bad for the beginning part of February. I'll have more details about the rest of the week coming up later on in the newscast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The University of Lethbridge could be headed for a strike as early as this week. In an overwhelming majority, the U of L Faculty Association voted 92% in favor of strike action in labor negotiations with the university's Board of Governors. The vote comes after nearly 2 years of inconclusive negotiations and 2 months of mediation. 87% of the Faculties Association's membership participated in the vote, which was held last Wednesday and Thursday through an online ballot, making history as the first strike vote by U of L faculty.
So that just shows that over 2 years, our members still feel just as strongly as they did, back then, that we need to see this kind of equity, parity, and respect, and we're not seeing it. And if we don't, unfortunately, our members may have to go on strike in order to get it. So that's where we are right now. Our hope is that the administration will see this. It has to have an impact on you when 92% of your employees say this cannot continue. Perhaps now that they see the numbers are the same as they were 2 years ago, they'll realize that the approach that they have been taking simply hasn't been working.
The union says that it has filed the notice to strike, with pickets scheduled to begin Thursday morning at 11 a.m. unless the two sides are able to reach a settlement before then. The YWCA Amethyst project has received a generous donation from Century 21 here in Lethbridge. Over $10,000 will be given out to help victims of sexual assault. The interim CEO of the YWCA, Tracy James, says this money will assist victims in a big way.
The Amethyst project is unique in that it offers a third option. So oftentimes you'll get a first and you'll get two options. The first one being medical support, after the assault. The second one will be to get the police involved to start an investigation. And then the third option is to have evidence collected, the forensic sexual assault kit done, and then Amethyst can take possession of that kit, and the person has up to a year to decide whether or not they want to go forward.
It's a huge part of our community, the YWCA Amethyst project. Even just personally, I didn't know enough about it up until very recently, and that just goes to show how little awareness in our community there is about this organization, and you never know who might need the support that they offer. So just doing our small part to help keep this program going and fully functioning is, it's the least we can do.
The third sexual assault kit is $650. The examined kit will help with forensic evidence during investigations. The Lethbridge and District exhibition is celebrating its 125th anniversary. Some of the upcoming events being planned to celebrate include the Lotteries program, Ag Expo, and Whoop Up Days, one of my favorites. The event center is expected to entertain over 400,000 guests for the upcoming season. The group CEO, Mike Workington, says 2022 is a unique opportunity for him personally, as he grew up here in the Lethbridge area and has been able to lead the charge for the organization.
I've seen this organization for the last nearly 40 years. It's something that's been an important piece of my life. And so the opportunity that exists before us and to help guide this for the next 125 is exceptional. This organization has had roots and lasting impact on this community for generations. And we anticipate the changes we're going through right now will have lasting impacts on generations of people who live in Southern Alberta for years to come.
The Lotteries program will guarantee a prize pool of $125,000. It's open to residents from across Southern Alberta. Outspoken Conservative finance critic Pierre Poilievre has thrown his hat into the ring to become the new leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. Now, to discuss this in greater detail is Tony Clement. Tony is a former cabinet minister with Stephen Harper when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister. Tony's also the host of Boom and Bust, a TV program, a show examining Canadian and global political and economic systems and their impact on Canadians. Tony joins us now from Muskoka in Ontario. Tony, Carleton MP Pierre Poilievre almost skipped the leadership race and explained why he wants to become Prime Minister. Isn't he getting a little ahead of himself here?
No, I think that's good marketing. He knows that the ultimate job is Prime Minister, and he wants to tell the viewers who are viewing that video, which is over 2 million people now, over 2 million views, that he knows what the ultimate goal is to replace Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister of the country. And it shows his laser-like focus. So I thought that was completely on message.
So who are some of the other strong candidates for the Tories? Would maybe Rona Ambrose jump back into the fray? Peter MacKay? How about John Baird?
No, and no. Leaderships are hard. I ran twice for leader, once nationally and once provincially in Ontario. You need a lot of money. You need a lot of organizers. It takes an incredible amount of time and energy of your whole family, not just yourself. So this is not just for somebody who wants to kick the tires. So Rona Ambrose is not running. John Baird is not running. Peter MacKay, who still has a campaign debt from the last leadership, is not running. So I think it's going to be a small group of people, very small. I think maybe 3 or 4 tops. I can see Leslyn Lewis jumping into the race. She ran last time, placed a respectable, third, but impressed a lot of people.
I'm glad you mentioned Leslyn Lewis, a social conservative. Tony, what will it really take to unite the CPC so that social conservatives don't feel left out?
I think the last couple of leaders haven't handled this terribly well. I think a leader who did handle it well was Prime Minister Harper, who was able to keep the tent large, but also find ways to accommodate disparate views. So I think we're going to need the same kind of thing this time around. There's no question that this is an ongoing issue, but the party has spoken. The party at convention, there always are resolutions dealing with abortion issues, LGBT issues, and the party membership has been pretty clear on this, that they're quite centrist on these things.
Thanks so much, Tony. Tony Clement is a former Stephen Harper cabinet minister and now host of Boom and Bust. Tensions continue to rise between Russia and Ukraine as the threat of an invasion seems imminent. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says thousands of Russian troops continue to line up along the Russian-Ukrainian border.
What the United States has reported on is that they have 70% capability. There are 83 battalions with about 750 troops each. You can do the math, there's about 100,000 troops already aligned and ready to go on the border. Russia first denied this. Now they are not denying this, and they're not there for anything other than to put this pressure on the Ukraine and to be ready to go right in. So yes, if it happens, it would be what the White House is reporting, approximately 50,000 deaths and 5 million refugees on the run. Again, I don't know how they calculate these numbers. It could be more, it could be less, but the bottom line is that it will be a global catastrophe if this does happen, if Putin does not decide to back down.
Lisa will also have details as to how American truckers are supporting their Canadian cousins during the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa. Watch her full report coming up later in our broadcast. Well, it was Medal Monday for Canada at the Beijing Winter Olympics. Snowboarder Max Perot led the way with a golden performance in men's snowboard slopestyle, while Regina's Mark McMorris grabbed the bronze. Speed skater Kim Boutin added bronze in the women's 500-meter event, and Canada's ski jumpers made history with a bronze medal in the mixed team event. That is great to see. The Winter Olympics continue in Beijing until February the 20th. Well, we had another wind warning here in southwestern Alberta today with gusts up to 110 kilometers an hour. How long will those Chinook winds be sticking around? Full weather details are coming up. Environment Canada issued another wind warning for our region today. We saw gusts up to 110 kilometers an hour once again. Jeanette Rocher is back with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, the plus side to the Chinook winds is the warmer temperature we experienced today.
Yeah, it absolutely is, Hal. If you can handle getting your hat blown off of your head, at least the trade-off for that is the warmer temperatures, and they are lovely. Look at all these double digits. Now, we mentioned before there was a wind warning in effect. Winds were up to 110. Into this evening, we're looking at 90K winds diminishing to 50K. Into tomorrow, Tuesday, we're looking at about 70 kilometer per hour winds with a high of 10 degrees though. Sunshine, also sunny skies on Wednesday with a high of 11. Now 15 degrees is our high for Thursday. We are keeping our eye on that because it could be a record breaker. The record high for that day was actually just over 13 degrees. So we'll keep our eye on Thursday to see if we break a record. Back down to 3 degrees on Friday, then up to 13 again on Saturday and 15 on Sunday. I don't know what's happening there on Friday, but we're going to have a little dip, a little roller coaster effect there. Average high for this time of year, 0. -12, the average low. High temperature on this day was back in 1954. It was 19 degrees, and we were sitting at a freezing -34 degrees back in 1994. 7:55 is when the sun rose this morning. We're actually in that 7 o'clock hour now. And sunset this evening, 5:36 p.m., giving us 9 hours and 41 minutes of daylight. Looking to the west coast for tomorrow, 8 degrees is the high for Victoria. Also 8 in Vancouver with a 60% chance of showers. Increasing clouds throughout the day in Edmonton with a high of 4 degrees, 40 kilometer per hour winds and 50K winds in Calgary tomorrow with a high of 9 degrees and partly cloudy skies. As we look to the rest of the prairies, we're seeing a high of 0 in Saskatchewan there. Look at Saskatoon. Mix of sun and cloud. We are going to see the chance of flurries tomorrow in Regina with a high of 0. 2 degrees the high in Winnipeg. Now Winnipeg could actually see some showers. As we look to the central part of the country, we're seeing temperatures drop quite a bit. They were quite a bit colder last week. This week we're looking at -1, the highs for Toronto and Ottawa, high of 0 in Montreal tomorrow. Looking at flurries all throughout that region as well. Now, major precipitation happening in Fredericton, in actually all of Atlantic Canada, I should say. 0 the high in Fredericton with snow. Halifax looking at freezing rain, chance of snow as well, 6 degrees the high. Same thing for Charlottetown. They're looking at flurries and a chance of freezing rain there, 2 degrees the high. -1 in St. John's, Newfoundland, also looking at snow there as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
WestJet announced more flight cancellations next month due to ongoing COVID-19 restrictions for travelers. The Calgary-based airline says it has canceled 20% of its flights in March, extending schedule cuts from this month. Flight data firm Cirium says since early November, WestJet and Air Canada have canceled 43% of their scheduled trips for March. WestJet says Canada is the only G7 nation still requiring pre-departure and on-arrival PCR testing for fully vaccinated international travelers. It is calling for periodic testing only on arrival. Cummins has signed a deal to become sole owner of a joint venture it formerly shared with Vancouver-based Westport Fuel Systems. The Indiana-based company says the deal to buy Westport's stake is worth around $20 million US. The joint venture that concluded at the end of last year was focused on designing and engineering natural gas engines for use in commercial vehicles such as trucks and buses. Westport makes natural gas, propane, and hydrogen components and systems for the automotive industry. When it comes to real estate, it appears as though there may be a shortage of homes available in Lethbridge. Local real estate agent Jeff Reimer with Royal LePage says it truly is a seller's market right now in the Windy City, and he says prices have also gone up over the past couple of years.
Yeah, that's risen. From 2020, it was close to about 300,000 for Lethbridge. And now that includes different genres of homes, not just single detached. And this year it ended up closer to 320-ish.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Lethbridge real estate agent Jeff Reimer discussing the real estate market coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 36 points on the day to 21,235. The Dow was up 1 point to 35,091. The S&P 500 was down 16 points to 4483, and the Nasdaq was down 82 points on the day to 14,015. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 99 cents to 91.32 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 34 cents to 4.23 US. Gold was up a cent to 18.2048 US an ounce, and silver was also up a cent to 23.02 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.22 per bushel, barley's at $9.53, canola's at $23.26, and corn is at $10.90 per bushel. Live cattle were down 23 cents to 141.83. Feeder cattle were down $1.08 to 165.03, and lean hogs were up 68 cents to 87.70. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 78.92 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson has declared a state of emergency in the nation's capital. Police in the city cut off protester supply chains, seizing their fuel. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is calling on the Trudeau Liberals to have an emergency debate on the trucker protest to try and find solutions as thousands of Canadians continue to protest government COVID-19 mandates. It appears as though more American convoys are forming, supporting our truckers in Ottawa. American journalist Lisa Daftari will have details for us in just a moment. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Discover more about the Blackfoot culture as they celebrate the 22nd Annual International Peace Powwow and Festival taking place February 19th and 20th at the NMAC Centre in Lethbridge. Experience Indigenous music and dance and the spectacular Grand Entry. Plus, find unique items at the craft fair. Tickets available now at the NMAC Centre. Current COVID rules will apply. For more information, visit the International Peace Powwow and Festival Facebook page. The 35th Annual Moonlight Run is taking place March 19th with both in-person and virtual events. This year's run will include a 6-kilometer walk and 10-kilometer run. For the in-person event, both distances will begin in downtown Lethbridge at Casa and head into the River Valley for a loop in Indian Battle Park. Then you will climb Wendy's Hill before returning to Casa. The Moonlight Run will follow all COVID guidelines required by the Alberta government. To register and for more information, visit moonlightrun.com. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
The world has its eyes on our nation's capital as Ottawa has been taken over by those who are frustrated by government mandates. Thousands are part of the Freedom Convoy continue to demonstrate in Ottawa. Ottawa's Mayor Jim Watson has declared a state of emergency, and the protesters say they're not leaving until all of the COVID-19 mandates are lifted. They're also hoping that Justin Trudeau will resign as Prime Minister. Now, there are other convoys going on in other parts of the world, including in the United States, supporting their brothers and sisters in Ottawa. And that's where one of our regular contributors, Lisa Daftari, joins us from. Lisa's in Los Angeles. Lisa, a large contingent of American truckers are forming convoys showing their support for their Canadian cousins?
Yes, I mean, this is the tangible support, right? Obviously, truckers being in the same industry, they are saying enough is enough. But think about all the other people who are virtually supporting these truckers, whether it's going to one of these websites that are collecting money and donations, or just verbally supporting them, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or any of the other social media platforms. These truckers have a tremendous amount of support. There's so many people who are saying, we are truckers, meaning we feel what you're feeling. Enough is enough. And regardless of where you live, what you do for a living, how you're being affected, whether you have children in school, whether it's your industry or your place of work that is demanding that you get vaccinated or demanding that you wear a mask or demanding something of you that is taking away your freedom, you're saying enough is enough. And that is why there are so many people that are united with these very brave, very courageous, very determined truckers. And to see American truckers in the same industry, trying to follow in their footsteps and saying, we drive alone. I mean, forget it. And I love this image. We have it on our website this morning, along with a story about the convoy. But the photo is saying there's a truck with a picture on it that says, we are not against vaccines, we are against vaccine mandates. And that is the point that they want to drive home, because that is the point that the opponents are using to discredit or to dismiss this movement. There are many ways in which they're trying to dismiss this movement, whether they're trying to say it's being violent, whether they're saying it's a state of emergency, whether they're saying that they are being vandals, whether they're saying they are elements that are quite nefarious inside of the convoy, whether there's swastikas or other signs. And again, these are stragglers. These are on the margins. We won't allow them to detract from the main point. That's what these truckers are saying. This is our movement. We're not allowing them to hijack it. And again, this is a movement for freedom. And because of that overarching theme, they have so many supporters in all corners of the world on this one.
Lisa, what can you tell us about the investigation into GoFundMe? As you know, the Freedom Convoy had around $10 million in the GoFundMe account. And then GoFundMe says, no, we're going to not give any of the money to the truckers for food, lodgings, and fuel. Instead, we're going to disperse it to charities. But then all of a sudden, because of pressure, they decided to refund everyone who donated to the actual cause. But now there's an investigation as to what's really been going on with GoFundMe. What can you tell us?
Yeah, you know what they did to themselves is they're going to be hurting on this one, Hal. Imagine you give $10 to a charity of your choice, and then you're told, we don't like the charity of your choice. We're going to give it to the charity of our choice. Well, we're not here to give money to GoFundMe. We're here to give the charity to where we want it to be directed, where our funds, our money, our emotions, and our passion is directed. And because of this, because of the investigations, now, Hal, remember what GoFundMe has sought out to do. Imagine if there wasn't this pressure of investigation. Imagine if there wasn't this, we're going to look into it and we're going to figure out what they've been doing. Because remember, they've been giving and trying to raise money for some very, very shady causes, very, very skeptical situations there that they're going to be looking into. Now, look, people gave that money fair and square. People gave that money because they wanted to support. And as I said, there's tremendous support for freedom and for this movement. So people came out, they gave all of this money and they wanted to shut down their page. At one point in the beginning, if you remember, they said, we're going to shut down the page until we hear where this money is going. Since when did GoFundMe request that of any of the other charities that they raise money for? And there are some, again, very questionable causes that have used GoFundMe. And the money has been, embezzled in ways that there are, you can Google this. You don't have to hear it from me. But the point being, people are upset. GoFundMe kept pivoting on its position, whether it's to shut down the page, whether it's to demand more information from the truckers convoy as to how this money was going to be spent, whether it was to allocate money, give them an allowance, a portion, a percentage of the funds each day, to now giving the money back to people who gave it. And people have to find a different way, which they have. They have found a different platform on which only $2 million has been raised. But the bottom line is this, Hal. They're trying to silence people. They're trying to stop people from giving money. They're trying to stop people physically from going out and protesting. And this is not the freedom that we're used to, especially here in the West. And again, kudos to these truckers and their supporters for not backing down under any of this pressure, under any of these obstacles and challenges. But We will continue to support them from the sidelines, continue to report on their cause, not because we're biased, but because we are pro-freedom. And if they take away their freedom, they can take away our freedom, and we won't even be able to have this conversation. So for that reason, we want to have a very clear line of communication, and we want to keep their story going.
Lisa, the White House says that Russia could attack Ukraine at any moment, but diplomacy is still apparently on the table. Now, there are reports surfacing that Russian President Vladimir Putin could annex Ukraine's Donbass region. Tell me more about that.
Sure, and we've known that from day one, right? We knew that Russia's ambitions and their goals for the region and in total are very clear. I mean, that what's missing here is what is the West's goal in this equation? That's what's missing from this picture. We know that Putin is a statesman. He's out to build his country and the Russian Empire and the image of his power and the actual territory size. We know that he inserts himself in almost all foreign policy issues. And now we see that all options are on the table. What's funny is that the White House decided a few days ago that they were going to walk back from using the phrase that the threat from Russia into Ukraine is imminent. They didn't want to give off this urgency or this picture of this emergency where that it's going to happen anytime soon, and they didn't want people to worry about it. What they did want to do is to say that, again, all options are on the table. They talked about sanctions. Again, those sanctions have been debated back and forth, whether to put sanctions on Russia before they go into Ukraine, which would leave us in a situation for Russia to say, well, if I do, I'm damned. If I don't, I'm damned. So why don't I just go ahead and go for it? I'm being sanctioned anyway. So it's a very, very difficult equation. But I think the most important thing here is to know that Russia has not backed down. They are very serious, and the threat is still imminent, even though the White House may not want to use those words.
And U.S. officials say Russia has assembled 70% of its military needed to launch this massive invasion of Ukraine that could result, Lisa, in tens of thousands of deaths. Could we see a world war here? Because will Russia even stop at Ukraine? Maybe they'll go after Belarus, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and so forth, and try and reassemble the USSR.
Sure. I mean, look, all of these are options, but obviously they have their sights set on Ukraine. The relationship between Russia and Belarus and the other nations that you mentioned is a bit different. The Ukrainians know this. They know that they have been in jeopardy of having this happen for many years now, and as a result, they have been trying to beef up their assets to the amount that they could, the level that they can. But obviously, that's not going to be on par with where Russia is at. Now, the 70% statistic is interesting. How do they calculate 70%? We don't know. But what the United States has reported on is that they have 70% capability. There are 83 battalions with about 750 troops each. You can do the math. There's about 100,000 troops already aligned and ready to go on the border. Russia first denied this. Now they are not denying this. And they're not there for anything other than to put this pressure on the Ukraine and to be ready to go right in. So yes, if it happens, it would be what the White House is reporting, approximately 50,000 deaths and 5 million refugees on the run. Again, I don't know how they calculate these numbers. It could be more, it could be less. But the bottom line is that it will be a global catastrophe if this does happen, if Putin does not decide to back down. And we'll see. We'll see how the United States, kind of responds to this. And I know that the Europeans are up in arms. They don't want this to happen. They don't know how to react. And we haven't had something like this happen in a long time. I mean, we're living in a post-World War, environment. So we have seen cyber attacks, and we have seen, proxy attacks by terrorist organization, but we haven't seen a nation try to invade another nation. And for that reason, this is something to kind of sit back and watch in some ways, handling it delicately. But we will see. We will see how Putin handles this.
Now, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says Beijing will end up owning some of the costs of a potential Russian invasion of Ukraine. Can you explain?
Yeah, well, they're right about one thing, because when you think that the White House is sleeping on things, well, it turns out that they're not. What we have talked about for a very long time, we've reported on this extensively at the Foreign Desk, is the relationship between Russia and China, and allowing this relationship to grow and allowing this partnership to grow. We also talk about the relationship between China and Iran, and China and now the Taliban in Afghanistan. We also talk about other nefarious relationships that are going on around the globe, like Iran and Venezuela, right? China taking over the African continent with its infrastructures and telecommunications projects. The issue is that while we are sleeping, China is taking over the world, and they are inserting themselves and getting involved in situations that weaken the United States' positioning, because that's exactly what they want to do. China doesn't want to become a world power. They are a world power. They want to become the world power. And for that reason, they're very excited about the prospect of Russia, putting the United States on alert right here and going against what the United States and the Western allies want. They would love for that to happen. And for that reason, Jake Sullivan is calling out the Chinese and saying you'd have equal blame in this because of the way that they have this close relationship with Russia and are really provoking a lot of the global tensions that we see right now.
French President Emmanuel Macron flew to Moscow today, seeking commitments from Russian President Vladimir Putin to dial down the tensions with Ukraine. But Lisa, let me ask you, will it really make any difference?
Who knows? I mean, this looks like it's really symbolic in nature and nothing more. Macron did speak to Joe Biden before he went on his trip. Now, who's a weaker leader, Macron or Biden? I don't know who would be perceived as a weaker leader. Now, it looks like it is pretty just symbolic, just a photo op. I went over there. I tried to, lay the law down. Macron also has issues back at home. He's up, for re-election. He wants to look like the big bad guy who's going out and fighting for freedom and fighting for sovereignty. Now, will it really work? I don't think a strong statesman like Putin is going to be afraid of a croissant-eating French guy like Macron. That's just, if you ask me, in one sentence. But we shall see. I mean, it's an interesting development, to say the least, to see him pick up and speak to Joe Biden and then go over and try to, assuage things by himself. We shall see. We wish him luck.
Lisa, there are reports that Iranian society is in a state of explosion because of crippling sanctions imposed on the country due to its illicit nuclear program. Social discontent has allegedly risen by 300% in the past year alone.
Yeah, and again, I don't know where these numbers come from. I would say it's been very high. If you speak to Iranians day to day, the sanctions, and not only the sanctions. Now, remember, Hal, when you want to paint the United States to be the big bad boogie guy, then you're going to blame everything on the United States. So if they do get pharmaceuticals into the country, because there are sanctions in place already, they will triple the price by themselves, or they will create a shortage in order to say, well, it's the United States' fault, especially because right now you have Iranians who have now are becoming more aware of the fact that it's not anyone else's fault but their own government. So to rally people back around the flag, to bring them in, to create this unified enemy outside of their own, they want to blame everything on the sanctions and blame everything on the United States. Now, don't get me wrong, the sanctions are obviously affecting the economy there. They're affecting shortages and things like that. But the government is absolutely creating, the fake shortages and really inflating things to a place where they, again, can take advantage of the situation as they always have. But under Donald Trump's presidency, a lot of these sanctions that were placed were extremely targeted, meaning that they were targeting sectors that would solely or attempt to solely target the regime and the cyber capabilities, the nuclear capabilities, and any weapons or military apparatuses. So because of that, we tried to attempt to not affect the people and the main street economy as much. But again, it all trickles down. Yes, they are being affected. But the biggest Achilles heel for this government is the people and their disenchantment. And that's exactly why they would be afraid of having people come out onto the streets to protest. That's exactly what happened 43 years ago. And today is actually the anniversary of the Islamic Republic of Iran. There was the revolution that happened that tossed the Shah of Iran out of his throne and brought in the Ayatollah Khomeini on this day, February 7th. So, you have a lot of history and you have a lot of discontent. You have mothers and fathers who tell their children about the glory days in the 70s and what happened to their country. So, the regime really wants to paint a bad picture of the United States, of the sanctions, and to bring people back to them and to support the government and to keep them off the streets.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for your time today.
My pleasure.
The Canadian economy continues to have its share of challenges with the ongoing uncertainties related to COVID, but it seems that overall, the residential real estate market has remained quite strong. Joining us now to talk a little real estate is Jeff Reimer. He's been a Lethbridge realtor for over 25 years with Royal LePage. Jeff, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Hey, nice to meet with you, Hal.
So Jeff, where are we at in Southern Alberta when it comes to the real estate market right now? Is it more of a seller's or a buyer's market?
Yeah, I would lean towards sellers right now. The inventory is lower than historically, which supply and demand just, leans it towards sellers. But it's not crazy, but it certainly would lean toward the sellers right now.
So how many listings would you say we actually have in Lethbridge right now? Let's say between 250 and maybe 350,000, approximately. Where are we at?
I know the inventory is down, though. We're looking at citywide. The inventory is down probably to just under 3 months of supply. That I do know for a stat.
How about the average home price right now in Lethbridge? Where are we at?
Yeah, that's risen. From 2020, it was close to about 300,000 for Lethbridge. And now that includes different genres of homes, not just single detached. And this year it ended up closer to 320-ish.
Wow, that's incredible. So what do you think is selling the fastest right now? Would it be the townhomes, the condos perhaps, not only for the first-time home buyers, but maybe also those who are thinking of downsizing?
Yeah, condos started the pandemic, just about 2 years ago as being hit maybe the hardest of types of homes because people were nervous about living in close quarters with others. And this year we've seen a good resurgence in the condominium and townhouse market. A little bit of getting back to school has also helped with the condominium and townhouse market. So the single family, though, had remained strong over the last 2 years, very strong.
Now, the older I get, the more I have a challenge when it comes to stairs. I know some of our viewers can relate to this as well. Would you say it's safe to say that maybe bungalows are becoming more popular as opposed to 2 stories, instead of having those 18 steps up and 17 steps down?
Yeah, yes and no. Certainly, yes, Lethbridge has an older population. It's kind of a retirement area for Southern Alberta because it's, closer to the border. It's warmer here than in Calgary, Edmonton, for sure. So yeah, bungalows do stay strong in that respect. But with the land prices going up and developers tending to make smaller lots, the general trend is more 2 stories actually. So it's kind of a weird trend because of the cost of land, right? And you see it in bigger centers even more, but Lethbridge, you still have a lot more choice. But yeah, the 2 stories are still doing quite well.
Have you noticed over the years as well, because you've been a realtor for close to 30 years now, like you said, the lot prices have gone through the roof. I remember when I was a kid growing up in a bi-level or a bungalow, we had a huge lot. It would take us maybe an hour and a half to mow the lawn. But now with some of these 2 stories that they're building, they're like on postage stamp lots. You can almost reach out of your bedroom window and touch your neighbor's house.
Yeah, it's certainly changed, right? And busier lifestyles, it's weird, but I believe lifestyles are more busier now than they used to be. Less gardening, more people doing the grocery store than doing gardens. I mean, there's a factor of that doing in the lot sizes, but you can still go to the communities just outside of Lethbridge and get bigger lot sizes, like for Coaldale or Colehurst or Nobleford. Yeah, you can still get good lot sizes though in Southern Alberta, which is nice.
Maybe with some of the grocery prices going through the roof right now, maybe people will consider getting the bigger lots and going back to gardening. Try and save some money that way.
Absolutely. My wife made me clean up the yard. She wants to put some raised flower beds in this year. And I think that's a bit of a trend. You see people doing more of that so they can control what they're eating. They're not concerned about, additives. They can grow their own stuff, have it fresh. And yeah, it's definitely, we're seeing a bit more of that for sure. And it's good, healthy lifestyles. So.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, a vegetable garden is good, and the flowers add a little bit of color, helps pick up our spirits, bring up our spirits a little bit. Now, there's certain areas of Lethbridge, Jeff, that tend to be more popular for buyers than others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it depends where you're at. All areas of Lethbridge have their pros. The west side's developing more just because there's more land available there, and the infrastructure's growing. The north side really did well with the implementation of that new park there up by Legacy. That's really helped them. And the south side is always, the commercial hub and close to the airport. And, for folks going south, that's always a prime area. There's just not as many areas to expand in the south. So, the demand is still strong in all three areas of Lethbridge.
I've been chatting with the mayor and some other city officials as well about the potential of maybe Walmart going into the west side. I talked to a lot of people who live on the west side, and they're begging for either Walmart or even a Canadian Tire. What have you been hearing?
Well, I don't have any privy information, but I do know that talk of a third bridge, if that could be years and years away. But specifically, I don't have news on that, but it's still a short drive. I live on the west side and I zip across that bridge in a few minutes and I can get downtown in 5 minutes from my house almost. So, Lethbridge is still a really accessible community from all areas. It doesn't take you long. You can get from one end to the other in about half an hour, no problem. And that's a real plus when you're considering communities to move to.
So Jeff, are people still hesitant about viewing homes during the pandemic, or are they pretty used to that now?
More used to it. I mean, it's still a concern, but the sales would indicate that we've done well of working through that. People are a little bit more at ease, certainly, than they were a year ago. But we still like to take precautions and wear masks and sanitize and be careful. But no, generally, it's been good, and we've worked through it, and the sales have reflected that that's been overcome.
How about open houses? Is that still a good way for you to potentially get leads or show people what the house looks like that's on the market?
It is an option. It's less of an option. People are more comfortable viewing initially on their computer and looking at virtual tours, but it still can be a good tool. I mean, nothing's different than going into a house and seeing and smelling and feeling the perspective that you don't quite get from a camera, and then standing out and looking around at the areas and how the rooms reflect and light reflects. And, you still need to go into a house to get the true feel of it.
Now, we've seen some record low interest rates. Do you think this trend will continue, or with inflation, are mortgage rates likely to start going up?
Yeah, I'm not an economist, but certainly the rates have been great. That's been part of the stimulation of our market. And Lethbridge is a conservative money town, I think, and so the lower interest rates has helped boost Lethbridge as well. And I think that there's pressure to slow down inflation for sure. So they're saying they're going to raise interest rates, and they were, they moved a few here this week, a little bit up, but I don't think they're going to do too much. When I talk to my banker friends, they're suspecting that they will rise somewhat, but they're still going to be reasonably low. I remember when I bought my first house, I locked in for 7 years. I was stoked I could get it at 7.625. So I locked it in for 7 years, I think it was. And now, I mean, the rates are still incredibly low, and that's going to keep the market, I think, moving fine.
You're right. I remember when I first bought our first home too, it was 80 to 90% of the payment that I would make would go towards the interest. But now it's almost like 50-50. That's what's amazing. Not only are you building equity, but at the same time, you're paying down your house. Now, Jeff, do you think a variable rate mortgage is still a good option in our current market?
Yeah, I think variable rates are still good. When I speak with some of my friends that study this stuff regularly for a living, if you take an example of what a variable rate would be over the last, let's say, 25 years, my friend Rick always says this. He says, and you look and then you take a 5-year rate and you work it backwards, you're still going to generally be ahead going with the variable. The challenge is it's just slightly more risk. But if you're not over leveraged and your debt load isn't too high, I think there's still a good argument for doing the variable. But if you want to lock in right now, it's not bad because they are probably going to inch up. So if you want to make sure your rate's secure and set for 5 years, it's not, but I definitely recommend talk to your mortgage broker, ask their opinion, then consult with your family. Still use the wisdom of friends and family that have gone through, more than just 10 years of life in the business world, and get their opinions on it. Ask family, ask friends, and talk with your mortgage broker before you make that decision, instead of just doing what you think is best.
Jeff, let's talk about how property values increase here in Lethbridge compared to some other markets. Like Toronto can go through the roof, Vancouver, even Calgary a number of years ago. We sold our house for $198. 4 years later, it went up to over $500,000. You really don't see that here in Lethbridge. So would you say it's more of a slow, steady incline, like maybe 2 or 2.5% each year? How do you see it?
Yeah. Well, it sure started like that when I started 29 years ago. But, some of these old timers would say, oh, yeah, just every year add on 2%. And you certainly can't do that anymore. In 2005, 6, and 7, it almost doubled house prices. Then we hit a peak there in Lethbridge around August of 2007, and then they went down a little bit, but we've regained that loss back. So I would say, right now it's the highest prices we've seen in my career in Lethbridge. And, it's a combination of things though. Lethbridge always was a good value for a town. But these big centers like in BC and in Toronto, when they can cash in and sell a townhouse for 7, 8, 900,000 and then move to Lethbridge, buy a big, beautiful house for 400,000 or 500,000, and then put some extra money aside or completely eliminate any debt and have a little nest egg, it's enticing. So we're finding right now, especially that we're seeing more people move from BC and from the East and taking advantage of the reasonable cost of living here and the lower house prices for sure.
But does the Lethbridge wind blow them back to BC?
Yeah, well, it's always a try. Who doesn't want to go to the mountains? But we have mountains in Alberta too, and we're only an hour and a bit from the mountains here in Lethbridge. That's what I love about it. We get the nice fresh air blowing in from BC, but we also get the milder temperatures. I still think it's one of the best places to live in the country.
How well are some of the bedroom communities around our city doing, like maybe Raymond, Coaldale, and Nobleford?
Yeah, they're doing quite well. Very few houses available in Nobleford. Coaldale's a hot little market. It's hard to find too much property there right now. Supply and demand there is keeping that market very strong. And Raymond as well. Raymond had a good year. Maybe in the last couple months calmed a little bit, but very strong over the year, just like Lethbridge. Yeah, maybe even more so in some of those towns.
So Jeff, let's talk a bit about the stress tests and the tougher mortgage requirements. Can you explain how they work?
Yeah, basically they just wanted to keep the debt load down of Canadians that were concerned about how much debt load they were having compared to what they should be able to handle in their opinion, and trying to calm the house prices in the larger centers. It really was needed more so in Vancouver and Toronto, for example. We really didn't need that here in Lethbridge. When it implemented, we thought, well, in theory that could be good, but we just don't need that here in Lethbridge. We're pretty calm and stable here. So yeah, they implemented it there, but we really didn't need it here in Lethbridge, in my opinion, whatsoever.
So Jeff, what advice would you give to a young couple trying to save up for a down payment to buy their first home? What sorts of things do they have to put together financially before they're ready to make an offer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that stress test factors into how they qualify. So they should get their down payment ready, so save up. You have to have a stable job. So before you make any life changes, maybe talk to your mortgage broker or your banker and say, I might be wanting to buy a house in the next year or two before you make a decision to change a job or maybe lease a vehicle, because it's going to affect your debt load. And that stress test we mentioned, basically it takes the current rates and it adds 2% or defaults to 5.25%. And basically it just qualifies you a little bit higher than what you're paying, so that if rates go up, you're not right away defaulting and losing your house. So it is a good thing in theory, but for a first-time home buyer, it's important to just go meet with your mortgage broker, get pre-approved, kind of understand that, what it is to understand your gross debt service ratio and your total debt service ratio, what the bank's going to want to see for your amount of income, that you're at a stable job for a period of time. They're going to check your credit. So make sure that you maybe do a little research with your banker ahead of time, so that if all of a sudden you say, oh, I didn't make that payment like 2 years ago, that you can get that rectified sooner, get that cleared off your credit. And then you can strategize with your broker as to how the best way to go forward will be.
Jeff, we only have a couple of moments left here, but I want to ask you about empty nesters. Are you seeing more who are downsizing here in southwestern Alberta?
Yeah, I guess that's always a factor when house prices go up. It's easier for them to sell and move into something smaller. I don't know if much more than before, but it's a good part about Lethbridge is we have good options. There's the new big building getting on Scenic that's going to take out some of the supply up, and there's always been a need in Lethbridge for good retirement housing. But as far as seeing more or not, I don't know, a lot more farmers have trended to sell their larger farms or sell their smaller farms into larger farms, and that retirement rural community has moved into Lethbridge and kept the demand strong. And that's an ongoing thing for Lethbridge. We're a nice retirement center for anyone in Alberta.
Yeah, plus we have lots of students here as well with the college and the university. Jeff Reimer, a Lethbridge realtor with Royal LePage for close to 30 years. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks. Nice chatting with you, Hal. Have a good day.
You as well. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.